3 separate bomb attacks across Baghdad.
تم إبلاغ إدارة القناة بإيقاف أعمالها على الأراضي المصرية.
The explosion was in the predominantly Shia Muslim neighborhood of Sadr City.
al-Abadi's government has been under pressure for weeks.
قرارا بسحب ترخيص العمل الممنوح لشبكة الجزيرة الإعلامية.
But the next challenge is taking back Mosul.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at the Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories we're covering this week. With bombs going off in Baghdad and ISIL to contend with, the Iraqi government clamps down on the media. More Russian journalists bite the dust after making the mistake of reporting on the finances of the Putin family. Is the writing on the wall for programs like ours? Can the Listening Post survive in the digital age? And
Everybody, argue.
It's an off-the-field issue.
That's all.
every sports debate show you've ever seen rolled into one. When Haider al-Abadi took over from Nouri al-Maliki as Prime Minister of Iraq in 2014, he promised greater freedom for the press and lifted bans on several networks that had been shuttered under the former administration, the idea being that the time had come to heal rifts in a divided nation. Less than 2 years later, Iraq's Communications and Media Commission, the CMC, appears to be reverting. It has recently shut down an Iraqi TV channel, al-Baghdadi, taken a satirical TV show off the air, taken down a critical news website, and closed Al Jazeera's bureau in Baghdad. With ISIL still holding significant parts of Iraqi territory and stepping up its attacks in the capital, the al-Abadi government faces an existential threat. However, critics are saying that silencing parts of the media is just the government's way of dodging questions over its failure to deliver the reforms it promised. Our starting point this week is Baghdad. In many ways, the Iraqi media have reflected the convulsive changes the country has seen since the 2003 invasion and the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. There has been an explosive growth in the number of privately owned news outlets. In a country comprised of Shias, Sunnis, and Kurds, the media landscape is similarly factionalized. And all the talk that accompanied Prime Minister al-Abadi's rise to power in 2014 of a new day for the Iraqi media has fallen victim, as much of Iraq has, to the threat of ISIL, as well as al-Abadi's inability to form a functioning coalition. What the Prime Minister can control is Iraq's media regulator, the CMC, which is the tool the government has used to come down hard on the media.
When Abadi came to power, and I went to work in his team, he came with the promise of reform. He came with a promise of change. And one of the main themes of that promise was actually to be more tolerant towards the media.
The CMC justified these recent set of actions under a set of security guidelines that were issued after the ISIS offensive into Iraq in June 2014. So anything that portrays the security forces in a negative light, or anything that portrays ISIS in a positive light, would be sanctioned by the CMC.
Actually, the CMC's job should not be to shut down media offices or TV channels, bureaus in Baghdad. Their job should be to regulate the media environment, not to crack down on the media for purposes that could well be political purposes.
Al Jazeera has been in and out of trouble with Iraqi governments, past and present. In 2004, its Baghdad bureau was shut down when the Alawi government accused the network of fueling hostility against forces in the US-led coalition. It happened again in 2013 when the al-Maliki government said Al Jazeera had a sectarian bias. This latest ban under Prime Minister al-Abadi is officially for violating broadcasting rules and regulations. But what it comes down to is terminology. Al Jazeera calls the Iranian-backed Shia-led forces fighting ISIL in Ramadi militias.
هناك تنظيم الدولة الإسلامية في مواجهة قوات عراقية رأس الحربة فيها ميليشيا الحشد الشعبي.
That term, militia, has troubling implications for Iraqis, given the atrocities various paramilitary groups have carried out in the country.
The term militia has a negative connotation in Iraq. Politically speaking,
Any military force that is not governed by the government or the Ministry of Defence is called a militia. Whether Al Jazeera supports or opposes the forces, it used terminology that is often used to refer to it. Why do we want to impose a single voice in Iraq? The time for imposing a single voice is over.
The word militia is an insulting word for the Iraqi people, not just for the government. Many of Al Jazeera's programs create tensions and sectarian divides. For example, Faisal Qasim's program never ends without a dispute between the two guests.
Al Jazeera issued a statement saying it was shocked and bewildered by the closure. Al Jazeera is committed to its editorial principles in Iraq, it said, and that the CMC's decision contradicts the promises of the Iraqi government to protect freedom of speech. Not even comedians are immune in Iraq these days. The CMC has ordered Sumaria TV to take the Bashir show off the air. The program deals in political satire, the way Bassem Youssef's show did in Egypt before it proved to be too much for the government there. The host of the Bashir show, a former Iraqi journalist who produces the program from neighboring Jordan, said the CMC's ban came after he refused the government's demand to soften the content. However, the shutdown that best symbolizes the structural and sectarian flaws in the Iraqi media is the closing of al-Baghdadiya TV. The al-Abadi government is Shia-led. Al-Baghdadiya is a channel popular with Sunnis and has made much of the Prime Minister's inability to form a workable coalition.
ايش تنتظر حيدر العبادي حتى يقدم قائمة من شخصيات وطنية مستقلة تخدم البلد كوزراء؟
It was ordered off the air by the CMC, the official reason given, operating without a license. The Iraqi media are as factionalized as the country they cover, so divided that there are Shia channels that rival factions within the Shia population won't watch.
You would have a channel like Al-Furat, controlled by the Supreme Islamic Council of Iraq, which is a Shia party in Iraq. And these channels would feature news predominantly about the political party that controls them. Even though Al-Furat is a Shia channel, this Shia party has conflicts with other Shia parties. So it's too simplistic to say you have a Shia media and a Kurdish media. You have media controlled by Shia parties and Kurdish parties, but often represents even the factional infighting amongst the Kurds or amongst the Shia.
Unfortunately, Iraqi media, in particular broadcast media, has failed to create a national identity for Iraqis. Each channel has a different agenda. We can't have dozens of channels representing dozens of groups, each of them only speaking to those who match their ideology. Each channel has its own agenda. Some channels repeat the news, others actually try to mislead viewers.
Iraq is going through difficult times. I know that the tensions are very high, but media organizations have a responsibility to not make the situation worse. Sunni, Shia, even some Kurdish media organizations are not professional, and some of them are even dangerous in what they show and what they preach to their viewers and listeners. So that's when we should see the CMC imposing its code of conduct or ethics on those who are actually inciting hatred and violence.
On the download now, our viewers with some thoughts on the state of journalism in Iraq.
The main problem of Iraqi media is most of the media outlet is belonging to various parties or political figures who wants to establish their own propaganda. In the south and middle of Iraq, the Shia media outlet. In the north and the Kurdish part of Iraq, the Kurdish media outlets. In the Sunni part of Iraq, we have since 2014 the ISIS media propaganda outlet. Despite the different media landscape in Iraq, we have the lack of access to information.
Other media stories that are on our radar this week. In northeastern India, 2 journalists have been killed in the space of 24 hours, both gunned down in public. The first murder took place May 12th in the state of Jharkhand. Akhilesh Singh, a reporter for the Hindi news channel Taza TV, was known for his reporting on corruption within the state. Local police have made 3 arrests. However, no specific motive has been offered. The next day, Rajdev Ranjan, who was with the Hindi daily Hindustan, was shot dead in the state of Bihar. Police there have made arrests. The journalist's widow says a series of reports by Ranjan on a local politician currently in jail charged with kidnapping and murder turned him into a target. The Press Club of India said it is with increasing dismay. We note the increase in attempts to target the press throughout the country by denigrating them, and if nothing else works, by eliminating them, as has happened in these 2 cases. One of the big red lines in Russian journalism, a no-go zone, is reporting on President Vladimir Putin's family. One news organization that crossed that line is now dealing with the consequences. Just weeks after publishing reports on the business affairs of the first family, including stories drawn from the leaked Panama Papers on offshore holdings, 3 editors, Elizaveta Osentinskaya, Roman Badanin, and Maxim Solyus, all working for a media group known as RBC, have announced their resignations. One clear sign that trouble was coming for RBC came when Dmitry Kiselyov, a stridently pro-Putin voice on the Russian airwaves, took the news organization to task over what it published.
Зато есть у американцев по миру и, разумеется, в России ассистенты, которые готовы лично Путина с офшорами все же связать, но хоть как-то.
RBC is owned by the Russian billionaire turned politician Mikhail Prokhorov, who finished 3rd in the 2012 presidential election. Last month, the Russian Security Service, the FSB, raided RBC's parent company and opened a tax investigation, leading Russian media watchers to speculate that Prokhorov may be forced to sell the company. A diplomatic spat between Turkey and Germany over a poem that mocked Turkey's president took a new turn this past week when a German court banned parts of the poem.
Ist Erdogan der Präsident?
The poem was aired 2 months ago and made some points, a few of them rather obscenely, about Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan. That led to Turkey demanding Germany prosecute the satirist Jan Böhmermann and to ban the poem. Prosecutors in the city of Mainz looking into Böhmermann's case have not yet said whether he'll be charged. However, another court in Hamburg has found the poem to be abusive and defaming. It issued an injunction against 18 of the 24 verses being published. The reason the court gave: to find a balance between preserving the right to artistic freedom and the personal rights of Erdogan. German law bans insults against foreign leaders. However, Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel has drawn strong criticism for allowing this case to be investigated.
Ist Erdogan der Präsident?
One German MP defied the government by reading the poem out in Parliament last week. There are some disturbing questions being asked at television networks around the world these days. Fundamental questions, such as, how can news organizations remain relevant in the digital age? The numbers don't look good. A recent report from the Reuters Institute provides some hard data on how traditional television viewing is falling fast, while viewing of video online continues to rise. According to that report, the decline in TV viewing is comparable to the fall in print readership seen by newspapers a decade ago. And we all know how that worked out. So, for those of us in the TV news business, it's a wake-up call. How can broadcast news attract the attention of a younger generation accustomed to watching digital, on-demand, social, and mobile video on any device, anytime, anywhere? Everyone is experimenting, from the traditional legacy broadcasters like this one to the new purely digital players, trying different forms of media to avoid becoming technologically outpaced, journalistically outmoded, and economically outdated. The Listening Post's Flo Phillips now on a medium in transition.
Those are the headlines here at Al Jazeera. Coming up next, the Listening Post.
Here at the Listening Post, we document the changes in the world of media. But like most TV news programs, our workflow is linear, dictated by a broadcast schedule.
Here are some of the media stories we're covering this week.
In order to meet our Saturday morning deadline, we start with an old-fashioned meeting on Monday morning to choose topics. Tuesdays are for research, questions, interviews. On Wednesday, it's into the studio to shoot links. Thursday's a game day. That's shorthand for scripting. And on Friday, the edit gets put to bed, finalized. It works, but is it fit for purpose in the digital age?
I didn't have time to watch a whole episode because it's almost half an hour and I don't have half an hour. But if I should happen to have half an hour to spend, listening post is really good content for the sofa. It's not so good content for waiting for the bus. When I tried to watch it, it took about 2 minutes, 25 seconds before the first item started. It looks nice on television, but it makes no sense online.
Listening Post is doing a lot of the right things. You chop those clips up, there's little video angles within each story, you add text on them, you get them into social media, you get them into social messaging apps, so you're spreading the word out in those ways as well. Where everybody's learning as they go along is what used to be called shovelware, where you just take stuff that has been broadcast and bung it online, shovel it online, clearly doesn't work.
Just sharing your content on Facebook and video is not equal to going digital. My advice to anyone, not just the Listening Post, my advice to anyone who is creating content for both platforms is to first put out the short form of that content, because the big advantage that digital has brought for the younger audiences is that it's prime time all the time.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6.
The audiences tuning in to this kind of newscast are getting older, and the trend for general TV news viewership, at least in the US and the UK, is alarming. Over the next 10 years, TV audiences will fall by a quarter. Legacy broadcasters have been forced to experiment, to find new ways to complement the more traditional offerings they've put on TV.
It's incredibly varied in terms of how they've approached it. For example, CBS, which has never had a 24-hour news network, decided to launch one, but when it did it as a streaming service, a digital-first operation. But then you also have companies like CNN, which launched Great Big Story. The focus for that unit is to expand beyond CNN's core offering, which has always been hard news. BBC has a few initiatives. They have BBC Trending, which is them trying to reach people on social platforms. But then you also have a service in the works called Livestream, which would allow people to basically get news content across platforms.
It's good that people are innovating and trying things like virtual reality services, news offerings, so particularly on the migrant story, for example. They've taken people into either a 3D or a virtual reality experience of being on the beaches with the migrants, trying to let the viewer understand and feel, if you like, through that experience. Live online video is going to be a really interesting thing. So we have Periscope, there's now Facebook Live, where people can do a live broadcast straight into their Facebook feed, and there's some quite interesting experiments there. And one of the things that does is takes the viewer, feels that they've got a little bit of on the inside loop. They're kind of inside the story alongside the journalist with what's happening. They feel they're getting a kind of peek behind the curtain.
Short, snappy videos on Snapchat and Instagram. Live video content on platforms like Periscope and Facebook Live. Texted vertical videos on social media platforms. These are just some of the ways traditional news broadcasters are experimenting with repackaging and repurposing their news content for the growing numbers of online viewers. But there is a new joint venture in India, Bloomberg Quint, which is turning things upside down.
Up until now, there are the big legacy networks here who are integrating digital into their workflow. But we're actually putting the horse before the cart, which is you're saying you're first going to go digital, optimize all ways in which business news content can be delivered effectively to its niche corporate audience in the digital space, and then bring those digital learnings to broadcast through an integrated newsroom workflow.
When it comes to the digital native publishers, whether we're talking about BuzzFeed or AJ Plus or Now This, what many of these companies have realized first and foremost is making content that is tailored to the platform. For example, with Facebook, because a lot of the on-demand videos are showing up in your newsfeed, you have to grab the viewer's attention within the first 3 seconds with a striking image. Facebook videos also autoplay on silent, so a lot of publishers will use text on the bottom of the screen. That way, someone can watch the video without necessarily having to listen to it.
There's one media organization that's done something seemingly counterintuitive. US-based Vice, which made its name catering to millennials on the web, has inked a deal with HBO to produce a daily newscast for their cable audience. as well as launching Viceland, its own 24-hour TV news channel just 3 months ago. Do they know something others don't?
Vice is launching a TV channel because that's still where the money is. Consumption habits are evolving. People are watching more on their mobile devices, more on their phones, more on their laptops. But the fact of the matter is the advertising dollars have not shifted the way consumption has. So for any business to be a legitimate business, you need to go where the dollars are. And right now, there's $70 billion being allocated to advertising on television. So it's important, if you have the opportunity, to be as diversified as possible. So that's why Vice is going on TV.
It's an ongoing experiment, but so far, no media outlet can report it has found the magic formula, the solution. Most of them are simply seeing what's working for others and doing a copy and paste job.
Emulating is a really stupid thing to do because things are changing quite fast, and if your strategy is to emulate what other successes, you will usually have a different starting point, and you will use quite a lot of time before you see, this looks like it's working, and you'll be a year or 2 years behind. You should rather try to just find out what is it that makes you strong and build on that.
No matter where you're watching us, on TV, on a tablet, on YouTube, or maybe you saw a short preview on Facebook, we're still alive. Whether that's as a result of new technologies or despite them doesn't really matter. What does matter is where we and other traditional broadcasts go from here.
More voices on the download now on old school news media trying to make their way through the new digital landscape.
The biggest problem is that TV news lost its main prerogative, and that's immediacy. Breaking news was first and foremost on TV, then on the radio, and then the day after on the papers. Now you get Twitter notifications. So if print was dying because of websites and tablets and smartphones, the same thing is happening to TV.
People can't always make time to consume an entire half-hour or hour news show just to get the 2 or 3 stories in which they're interested. Online news delivery makes it possible to provide additional information about a story by linking out to various resources. Again, it comes down to trust and credibility, making it easier for people to check their facts.
Finally, if you ever come up with a successful format for a new television program, prepare to be flattered by imitators who then copy your idea. 15 years ago, the U.S. sports channel ESPN launched a new show. The format featured 2 hosts with guest journalists discussing sports stories, yelling at each other a lot, and for every good point that a guest made, 1 point would be awarded, which meant that there were winners and losers, and audiences like that. The show is called Pardon the Interruption, and that format has since been aped by other broadcasters. Now, a U.S.-based YouTube channel called The Kicker, which looks at the lighter side of sports, has taken that basic formula and replicated it. It's all there, the bloviating, the arguing, the throwdowns, the stats geek, and just a touch of diversity. They call this video every sports debate show ever. They should have called it Pardon the Deconstruction. We'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.
It's Reaction Time, presented by Sports Drink. Here's your host, White Anchor.
Welcome to Reaction Time, where we react accordingly. 5 days a week, 2 shows a day. So let's meet today's panel. From East Coast Radio show, another white guy.
Let's do this.
From Midwest newspaper, minority commentator.
It's a pleasure.
From University Not Competitive at Athletics, math-based analysis guy.
100% ready.
And from magazine, it's minority female correspondent.
Really surprised to be here.
Open drive.
A lot of good things are happening with the current winning team, but are they as good as what happened then with the past winning team? So what's better, now or then?
Come on, man. Back then, it was pure. I mean, what do you call this? It's not like it is now. I mean, that's why we haven't had a dynasty since the Big City Animals, man.
Since the Big City Animals? The regional colloquialisms were a dynasty. The Southern State Native American references were a dynasty. The Northern Weather Systems dynasty.
Ooh, 3 tallies. Everybody? Argue.
It's an off-the-field issue. That's all it is.
It's here to stay, and it is a lovely
There's no place in the game. No place.
Like I read Rainbow.
All right, that's enough. Final tallies are there. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
This was Reaction Time. Tune in for our next episode in 35 seconds.